Would you know the difference between this kind of parking ticket and this kind of parking ticket? Because time and time again I hear that people don't understand the difference between the two, even though there is a fairly significant difference between the two. You see, one of them, this one, is a penalty charge notice. This one is a fine issued by a local authority or some other body that has the authority to issue a penalty charge notice. Whereas this one is a parking charge notice. Now, call me somewhat cynical, but I think they are deliberately designed to look almost identical, whereas a parking charge notice is just an invoice. It is not a fine, and it is just an invoice. And the invoice is issued on the basis of a breach of contract. So let's talk in this video about parking charge notices and how you might be able to escape liability for them within the bounds of the law. So as I said, a parking charge notice is an invoice for breach of contract. It might include, firstly, the charges that were supposed to be paid for the parking itself, plus an administration charge which has been decided at Supreme Court level not to be a fine and thus is a fair administrative charge for breach of contract that they can enforce against you as a matter of law. However, that's not the end of the matter. I frequently hear that people cite this Supreme Court case and say there is nothing you can do to fight against these parking charge notices. But that's not entirely true. Because just because there is a case at Supreme Court level that says these are administrative charges that they can enforce against you, it doesn't usurp the rest of the body of law, contractual and common and even statutory law. Because if there is a contract in place, first of all, it's got to meet the minimum terms of a contract. They've got to show that there is an offer, acceptance, and consideration. Now, many people in the past have argued with me about the formation of a contract and your acceptance of that formation of a contract when you're driving onto private land and a contract is formed. Now, there doesn't need to be a person standing there handing you a contract and signing it. This is all myth and nonsense. Contracts of this nature are usually routinely, automatically concluded by you driving onto the land, parking, paying your fee, and then coming back and taking your car away later. That is a short-term license to use that parking space for the requisite period of time that you've paid for. The sets of terms and conditions should therefore be displayed to you so that you have the opportunity to read and accept or not those terms and conditions. What if you don't accept those terms and conditions and you drive away? The argument, as has been held in court, is clearly you didn't park your car and therefore you didn't accept the contract, therefore there is no contract. It's been decided in case law before now that parking is, as the judge put it, putting your car somewhere and leaving it there. That is essentially what parking is. Whereas if you drive in, you drive around, either you don't find a space or you look at the terms and conditions and you think, this is too expensive, I don't want to park my car here, and leave, there is no contract. However, that doesn't stop various companies issuing you with a parking charge notice. Only then, what do? How do you fight it? Because if you didn't park, there's no contract, they shouldn't be able to reclaim these fees from you, although many of them do. I had an email just yesterday where somebody was in a car park for around 10 or 11 minutes, looking at the signs and deciding whether or not to park, and presumably decided against those terms and didn't park and drove away. In those situations, if the person did genuinely not park and there is no contract, that claim or prospective claim is going to fail, or is likely to fail in court, because they won't be able to prove that there was a contract there in the first place. But as I said, there are various different ways of proving this. Now, I'm going to plug our app once again, which is Proofify, linked in the description below, which will help you to prove these sort of claims. Because if you are in this position, you've driven onto a car park and in fact, you decide not to park there, or there's any one of a number of reasons, which I'm going to come to in a minute, that mean that this contract will be unenforceable, you can take evidence, snapshot it, save it on Proofify. So if ever you get one of these parking charge notices later, you'll have the evidence to hand. Because what I've done in the past is take a photograph of such things to say, well, this isn't fair. I don't accept these terms, so I'm driving away. So I've taken a photograph of it. Sure enough, later on, I've got a letter through to say, you need to pay us this charge. And I say, no, I don't, because I took a photograph of the sign and this is why I'm not paying it. Or preemptively, you can send it off and say, this is why I won't be paying it if you do send me a parking charge notice. I've done that before as well. Even then, they came back to me and tried to dig and say, well, this is why you should be paying it. And I wrote back to say, no, I'm not, because I didn't park or the signs weren't clear. So you can use Proofify to store this kind of evidence in case you need it later. So what are the reasons that you might be able to challenge these things? Well, there's a number of different scenarios and a number of different reasons. First of all, let's be clear, if you have genuinely overstayed or you have genuinely parked outside of a bay or badly, then you are likely to be in breach of contract if and only if the following few things apply. If they are relatively clear and prominent and easy to see, then you're not going to have much of a chance. If, however, the sign is very small and on the other side of the car park, then you're going to have a valid argument that this sign was too small, too far away, too unclear, ambiguous, or any of the above, and therefore they shouldn't be able to enforce this contract against you. Equally, if the terms are unfair, such as you owe us these fees regardless of whether you park or not. Because if you drive on with the intention of parking, but then you consider the terms and decide against them, but one of those terms is you owe us money anyway, that's going to be an unfair term because there's no consideration. You didn't park, you just went on. And if you take this to an extreme, by way of example, if it said that it was £50 an hour, which I think is ridiculous no matter where you are, and you decide there's no way I'm paying £50 an hour, so you leave, then by driving out, in my view, you are going to have a good chance of arguing that this was just an unfair contract. There's no way you should be held to these terms because £50 an hour is ridiculous, and to be held by paying a minimum of 1 hour even though you didn't actually park there is quite frankly ludicrous, and that is just not going to win in court, in my view. Not that this is legal advice, of course, but if you are in that situation and you see these signs and it's ambiguous, unfair, unscrupulous, too far away, whatever, then if you take evidence of this so that if ever they do come back to you later trying to enforce a parking charge notice, store it on Proofify, and then you will have easy reference to this evidence in case you need it in court later. Not only that, we are going to continually develop Proofify, so I will have blueprint and template documents for you to use, not to be a replacement for legal advice, but for you to use as a starting point, as a template, as a checklist, whatever you want it to be, to fight such claims such as parking charge notices that you may be able to get out of. For example, if you've attempted to pay but the machine didn't work and you've just got back, you've returned, and you want to prove that you've tried to do this and that you are willing to pay and you haven't dishonestly parked your car with no intention of paying, again, you can store all of these things on Proofify. And of course, if the company is a member of an accredited trade union such as the British Parking Association, they will be prescribed appeals processes such as the Parking on Private Land Appeals, which is an independent adjudicative body. Even those companies that are not members of such an association, you can still correspond with them and you can still put your case to them, and otherwise they have to take you to court over it because ultimately it is an invoice for breach of contract. So I hope that helps you to understand these parking charge notices as against penalty charge notices, which are a fine, which I've dealt with in other videos. And don't forget to check out Proofify. We are running an early bird discount subscription right now until the end of April. So sign up. Thank you for your support. Thank you to everybody that signed up so far. Please remember to like this video and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.